So let's talk about this, because while this person is clearly clueless and needs some education, let's talk about white privilege, because there was a time when I was absolutely certain that white privilege did not exist. And then in 2008, I was taking a class, and I won't go into the greeting card story, because I have talked about that numerous times here on my TikTok, and that was my first seed that came into my head that was like, oh, maybe white privilege does exist. The second two things that happened, I'm pretty ashamed of. So they asked us in class, the social work class that I was taking at the time, what we think it would be like to be a person of color. And specifically, they said, what do we think it would be like to be a person of color and walk into a store? And I'll remind you, this is when I was thinking white privilege doesn't exist. I grew up poor. I've had trauma. I've had blah, blah, blah. I was like, white privilege does not exist, because I did not feel like I was privileged growing up. And my first thought when they asked us that question was nope, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be a person of color and walking into a store. That dropped the second seed. So I was like, holy shit, there's got to be something to this. If I immediately don't want to even envision this scenario, there's got to be more to it. The third thing that happened, which I'm probably the most ashamed of, is I was reading our textbook, and our textbook said in 2032, white people in the United States would be the minority, and people of color would be the majority. My first thought at that point was, holy shit, white people need to have more babies. Like, we can't become the minority in our own country. That was the end of my denying white privilege, because I didn't even know that I had that thought in my head. And then when I read that, that was my very first thought. And like I said, I am super ashamed of it even at that time. And that's when I started thinking, because my second thought was like, holy shit, where did that even come from? Like, I would not have thought that I was prejudiced or racist or whatever prior to that. And clearly those things existed. And you guys can all come at me on here and be like, yeah, it's terrible. I agree. But you all are the same. All of us white people, we are the same. We might be fighting against it. Like, I'm actively fighting against the prejudice that I have at every moment that I have it. Every moment that I'm aware of it, I am fighting against it. But we all have it. So to this person, Renee in the South, you need to do better. You need to educate yourself, because you're coming across looking very ignorant.
Angela, this is a really good question, and I'm going to do my best to answer it, but I probably don't even fully know how much my white privilege has helped me prosper. I have to back up a little bit, because I don't know if you know who Brene Brown is, but she does a lot of work around shame. But she has a video that really affected me. And it was like, basically she says that the way that you see the world, your lens that you look through the world at, is soldered to your face. You can't take that off. Like, I can't see the world through a black person's lens. And the way that you do that is you believe people when they tell you about their experiences. That's how you can see the world through their lenses. And so a lot of this has been brought to my attention by listening to black people, mostly online. But there's one thing that I think about often is like, I have the privilege of going into a store and not feeling like I'm going to be followed around because they think I'm stealing because I'm not black. And the reason that I think that's a perspective is I've heard black moms that like tell their kids to keep their hands out of their pockets. And like, it just is gut-wrenching to think that somebody has to tell their children that. Here's a great example, and I cannot believe I'm about to tell this story on the internet. When I was like 20 years old, I dressed up for Halloween as a pot fairy, like a weed fairy. Like, I decorated this little like earthy fairy costume with fake marijuana leaves. Anyway, I believe I was 20. So I think I was underage, very drunk, out in public, at a restaurant in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, on the phone with my boyfriend. A cop comes over to me and says something to me like, you don't need to be out here on your phone. I start yelling at him, telling him to leave me alone and I can do what I want and blah, blah, blah. At one point, I took my fairy wings off like I was going to fight him and was like, well, take me to jail if I've done nothing wrong. If I'd have been a black girl, I'd have been arrested 110%. And I probably should have been. I was underage drinking and I was antagonizing a cop. That's what I think my white privilege is. If it was a black man, God knows what would have happened. So I think that speaks volumes to my white privilege. But I definitely get to move through the world easier because I'm white. Okay, another one is I grew up in North Baton Rouge in a bad part of town in a trailer.
Hello brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you're doing great from wherever you're watching me from. As you know, I'm your host and presenter H Stories. I want to talk about what is called white privilege. Oftentimes this has been one of the biggest debate when it comes to issues with race and racism in the United States. As a person who is really interested in this topic, I'll honestly say that majority of the time we have seen white people deflect from the truth that they had white privilege. At least they had, even if it's not today, right? But they had the white privilege, and some still have the white privilege until today. Why am I saying so? And I'll base my argument from slavery. These are people that had 400 years of head start. Because remember, when you enslaved a person, it means that you could do some things that they couldn't do, right? And that's what happened. It means that you had privileges before that black people didn't have. And even with that, you managed to build your schools, you managed to build infrastructure, you managed to put money in your pocket, you managed to build houses. You left black people with no houses. Now, somehow, somewhere, due to abolition of slavery, now people started doing what is called free labor, where people willingly could work on the farms of white people, but not forcefully as slavery had usually happened. I'm trying to root this back on history. So this is what happened. When black people were left to be economically free, of which still black people were not economically free. Remember, there's something called redlining that was happening in the black communities. Redlining was the houses of black people were marked with a red mark, to mean that they cannot get any financial support from the government, while white households got and had this financial support. What does this tell you? This told you that they were still white privileged and they leveraged on this. Look at white farmers, look at black farmers. Tell me if there is no white privilege there. There is white privilege there. And I'm going to be explaining it inside the video. But first, I want you to watch this video where we are seeing a couple of people arguing whether there is white privilege or not. But at least this is a topic that we need to discuss. So join me today in this conversation. I'm your host and presenter Generic Stories. And for those who are watching me for the first time, I'm just asking you to please subscribe to the channel, join the membership, and really get to see what I can offer you. For those who are always coming back to my channel and supporting my channel, man, I'm really, really grateful. And if you wish to buy me a coffee, I will appreciate, I don't mind, for you supporting my channel. But until then, I want to start this video. I'll be back with my thoughts in regards to this. So let's watch the video. I'll be back.
Park for 2 or 3 years. We lived there, and back when I had more racist views, I would be like, okay, well, if I can make it because I came from nothing, then anybody else can. So I don't want to hear how you can't do whatever you want in life. And that was kind of across the board for black, white, whatever. But what I didn't want to see or didn't really understand is that I also was starting at a much different place than a lot of people. My family does have, I don't know if it's generational wealth, but my grandparents had money and my one set of grandparents paid off my like $10,000-$12,000 student loans when I graduated. And my other grandfather gave me $5,000 towards the purchase of my first house. And the first set of grandparents paid for me to go back to college and get a whole nother degree. So like, it's easy to cherry pick from your life and be like, well, I lived in a bad part of town in North Baton Rouge and I grew up in a trailer park, but a lot of people didn't have the backing at the end of the day that I had. And so I don't know if that's as much, I guess that is white privilege, right? Because a lot of Black people's grandparents don't have money because they weren't given opportunities. They weren't allowed to have certain jobs. They weren't allowed to go to certain schools and have been oppressed over time. So like, yeah, if the Black person next to me living in the trailer next to me, well, if they didn't get out, then they didn't work hard enough. Well, you know, maybe their grandparents didn't help them. Maybe their grandparents didn't help their mom get out of the trailer park because they had the money to own. And not to mention my grandfather owned the trailer park that we lived in. So that's as real as I can be about it as far as I know it to be.
So listen, you know what tickles me pink? So there was this girl that I was following on Facebook, right? And today she made a post talking about, oh, I'm going to use my white tears and I'm going to use my white privilege and I don't care. I'm tired of being a punching bag, you know, whatever. So I commented on the status. I said, you can be mad and you can be frustrated at whatever the fuck it is going on in your life, because I had no fucking clue what she was talking about. But to acknowledge that you're going to take advantage of a system that you know benefits you and oppresses others is just not it. And then I proceeded to block her. So I posted that on my Instagram because I said, it's really crazy how y'all white people will say that there's no white privilege, but then you'll turn around and loudly express that you're going to use it when it's convenient for you. And I also mentioned that y'all wonder why other races can't trust us. It's because bitches like you act like this. But anyway, that's not the point. So the point is that after I posted that, now if I made that post, right, that would show anybody that looks at that post clearly where I stand on the matter. And somebody proceeded to DM me and try to argue it. Listen, I'm okay with people having different beliefs, you know what I'm saying? But why would you think that your DM was suddenly going to change my mind? It drives me nuts when people do stuff like that. Did you really think at my big age of 33 years old, your DM was going to change my mind? And suddenly I was going to have some fucking epiphany and jump to the other side. People really crack me up. Not needless to say, I spent a nice little minute, typing a paragraph explaining and educating to this person. I doubt it's gonna really do anything. But why do people do that? I just don't get it. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and deny that America is the problem, because I've traveled outside the US. And yes, I will definitely be the first to say that the government wants to keep it that way. The government wants to pit us against each other. The government wants to keep baiting us. The government wants to keep us divided. I know. But we will not act like there are not plenty of US citizens who love what the government believes in and who support that and who want to keep that going. Trust me, I am just as tired of racism as y'all are. But I'm still not ignorant enough to believe or to try to promote that it does not exist. I'm not ignorant enough to believe and promote that white privilege doesn't exist in certain circumstances, because it does. I have seen it with my own two eyes. I've seen it out in the real world. I've seen it when I was locked up. I've seen it when I was younger. I've seen it now. So I'm sorry if I'm continuing to see it over 30 years of my existence. Pretty sure it's a real thing. See, unlike a lot of you motherfuckers, I don't go off of the whitewash history in schools. I don't go off the news. I don't go off of these petty ass outlets where people trying to talk shit and lie and make up stuff and edit and change how things are. No. I go off of pure experience of things I have seen with my own two eyes. When we've had slavery, segregation, Jim Crow, redlining, Great Lakes of this country drowning out black-owned cities, judicial systems that do not allow any non-white person to not have a fair trial back then and today, police brutality, the KKK, cultural appropriation that affects people getting jobs, blatant video footage on multiple social media platforms showing right then and there how businesses or people in a social setting are being racist. Doing all the math and realizing that non-white people have only had semi-freedom for 59 years. Keyword semi. And my grandma's 80. Miss me with the bullshit. Some of y'all just want to stay delusional, and that's okay. I just won't be delusional with you. Y'all be safe out there. Y'all gotta stop confusing wealth privilege with white privilege. The same excuse that I always hear from the white people that want to argue it is, I've had to work hard for everything that I've got, and I wasn't handed any money or a silver spoon, and I was poor, and blah 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 fucking blah. Guess what? I was poor too growing up. Guess what? I am still to this day in my 30s a struggling single mother. Stop using the fact that you've had to work your ass off for everything having anything to do with your skin color. There's a lot of us in this country, white, black, blue, purple, green, yellow, that don't have money. That's called the middle class and the lower class. The privilege that you got is something that you don't even realize and that you take for granted every time you step out the house. You can get pulled over and not have a care or worry in the world that you're going to get pew-pewed or unalived. You could get arrested for a DUI and not have a care in the world or worry that you're going to make it to the jail alive. You can walk around the mall or a grocery store or a convenience store and not be followed around based off of how you look. I will say some people that are heavily tatted get judged, but that's besides the point. You don't have to worry about your hair being a problem on whether or not you're going to get a job position. There's a certain bias and profiling that goes on a daily basis to non-white people. But because you're white, you will never understand what it feels like to be profiled for something you never thought you would get profiled for. Now, I will give some people the benefit of the doubt, right? Your life experiences and things that you are in proximity to are going to change your perception to things. But it's just diabolical to me that racist people or people who want to claim white privilege don't exist. I will stand 10 toes down believing that Jesus and a bunch of stories in the Bible are true and a bunch of people that you ain't never seen in your goddamn life without seeing it, right? But you can't grasp your head around the fact that the things that we're talking about exist even if you haven't seen it. You can't grasp your head around the fact that just because you ain't gone through it means it doesn't exist. And even when it exists, right, it's not something that you should feel defensive about. It's not something you can help, unfortunately. So the least you could do is be empathetic to it, right? The least you could do is recognize it and acknowledge it, right? The least you could do is not minimize other people's experiences and feelings about it, right? Like if stubborn was a race, I swear to God, it would be white people. It's not like you have to kiss people's feet and bow down. All people are saying is, hey, we just want you to understand, acknowledge, and empathize. And a lot of y'all don't have loved ones or people that you truly care about that you've watched go through shit. Because if you did, you would not have the same perception as some of us. And that's just a factual piece of information, whether you want to admit it to yourself or not. Out of sight, out of mind does not pertain to this concept. Like I said in part 1, some of y'all want to stay delusional. I'm not going to be delusional with you. I get that there's always going to be the exception to the rule, but you cannot sit here and act like millions and millions and millions of people are just pulling this shit out their ass. The quicker people start listening to comprehend and understand instead of listening to respond is when we'll finally make some progress. Y'all be safe out there.
I have a question. Does anybody else notice that when people talk about white privilege, they can never tell you how you benefit from it? I'm not benefiting off any system. I don't even have food stamps, Medicaid. I don't have any of that crap.
Hey there. I know you don't know me. My name is Senor Barragan. I'm an educator, and I spend my free time on TikTok helping people deal with race-related issues. I can help you understand this idea of white privilege a little bit better. But let me start off by saying that white privilege is not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't make you a bad person. I would know. I have some privileges of my own because I'm a male-identifying person. Privilege is not necessarily the idea of having more or getting more from others. It's more about a lack of obstacles in your daily life. White privilege means that because of the color of your skin, you have to deal with less obstacles than somebody with darker complexion. Let me give you some examples. White privilege is being able to apply for a job and people not automatically connecting a negative stereotype to you based on the color of your skin. Think about all the negative stereotypes about men from south of the border. And those are the things they think about when they see me apply for a job at a lot of places. White privilege is being able to learn about historical figures that probably look like you. To help understand this one, think about all of the people of color that you learned about growing up. You'll probably mention 1 or 2 indigenous American names, maybe Malcolm X, maybe Martin Luther King, maybe Cesar Chavez, and compare that to the amount of people with your skin color that you probably learned about. And the truth is, there is a lot of important historical figures that are people of color that we should be learning about. White privilege is that people don't look at you as a threat just based on your skin color. We can talk about police shootings here, I can tell you personal stories of people walking away from me when they see me walking near them, but I think there's many examples of this. I hope that helps. And next time if you ask some hard questions, keep your duets or your stitches on. It makes it easier to answer.
Hey guys, just a friendly reminder that the people who banned black people from schools, the military, the GI Bill, enforced redlining, ensured that black people can get basic reparations, the people who lynched Latinos and are now locking Latinos into concentration camps, the people who banned all Asian immigration, period, the people who broke hundreds of treaties with Native Americans and mass murdered Native Americans, and the people who are now trying to ban teaching about all that history under penalty of fine and imprisonment, want you to stop making everything about race.
Gavin Newsom is the perfect embodiment of what it means when people of color say, use your white privilege. Gavin Newsom is abusing that white privilege on Donald Trump. And here's why I say this. If Barack Obama or Kamala Harris, Jasmine Crockett, AOC, any person of color, any black person of color, whatever, did any of the that Gavin Newsom is doing to Trump right now in the news, in the media, social media, they would not be able to survive that. And you know it. Trump supporters know it. Leftists know it. We all know it. So Gavin Newsom, sure, he might not be the perfect guy, but he's the guy using his white privilege correctly. That is how you use your white privilege. And this also shows two things. One, how racist this country is in the political realm. And two, how scared Donald Trump is of other white men that are just as loud and brash as he is. When somebody matches his energy, he cowers away like a little bitch. Gavin.
Hello, brothers and sisters. You've heard these ladies' arguments, and it's okay because everyone have their argument. Well, one thing that we need to recognize is that in as much as the extent of white privilege is not there as it used to be, but it's still there, brothers and sisters. There is a preferential treatment towards white people as compared to black people, and you'll agree with me. Even in spaces like public spaces, you are going to see this privilege. It might not be shouty as it was initially, but brothers and sisters, it is still there. It exists, and it is with us here. I said that I was gonna give my arguments in regards to this, and it's important to talk about all this. According to the reports that were there initially, I'm talking about white farmers versus black farmers. Black farmers got support, but black farmers didn't get support. Why? Because white farmers were afraid that when black people get the financial support they were getting, it means that the job market, it will be like they feared the competition, and now they try to find a way to monopolize the agricultural market, the farming market, right? And they did it possibly by the use of government, because the government supported this. The USDA didn't support black farmers. It left black farmers to fend for themselves, and these made black people left farming because they couldn't do it large scale. Also, white farmers had the opportunity of employing all these immigrants that came to the United States. Black people, since they didn't have the capital to do so, they didn't do that. And you see the extent of all this. Another instance of white privilege is when you see when a lot of black people were being enslaved. This means that these people worked on their households and didn't go to school like their white counterparts, the white kids. So you can't compete with these two groups of people. The basis of education, white folks had a lot of education, like we're talking about educational disparities between black people and white people. White folks had education firsthand. But within that, we still had black people that still were rising and wanted to get all this education. And black folks learned. And still, the job market, there is still white privilege. And you understand how education and job market affects one another. Now, when a person hasn't gone to school and when a person has gone to school, what does this mean? This means that the person who has gone to school, people, it's common and it's obvious that they have some skills that people that hasn't gone to school have. That's come preferential hiring. White people were hired so much as compared to black people because education was a factor that affected all these issues. Right? And I feel like we need to address this point. So education, these people got education. People say, black people have talked about this. For a black person to be in a sport that a white person is, it means that this black person has to work as thrice as hard to be on this sport. And when you see a black person thriving in a sport where there's a lot of white people, know that that lady or that black gentleman is putting in work and can beat all his competitors in the same field because he's putting work. But because of somehow the system is against black people and the system has always been rigged against black people, it still remains and it works that way. I'm gonna be introducing a word called meritocracy, right? Meritocracy is the idea that if you work hard, you are going to get whatever you want. If you work hard, you are going to be on the merit. It means that if you work hard in school, you will get job, you will get employed, you will earn so good, right? The meritocratic lie that people were given. But initially, white folks had safety nets, and these safety nets helped them such that even if things were so much bad, because meritocracy is a lie, since so much things were happening, like economically, and even today is happening, they still had their safety nets. But when the safety nets went loose and they didn't get nobody to support them, now the reality started eating them. And they started understanding that, damn, we had the privilege, but the privilege is now gone, right? Black people were told, pull yourself by your bootstraps, right? Since the system is failing you, the problem is you and it's not the system. That's how they put this to black people. And so looking at all this and the head start that white folks had, honestly, I will still put my argument that white privilege is still there. The only thing is just they still have those safety nets. The safety nets are getting loose because we are seeing also white people are questioning if indeed they enjoyed or they have the white privilege. The people who are there before you enjoyed the white privilege, and it's going like to an end. So brothers and sisters, let me know what you think about this video. As you know, I'm your host and presenter G Stories. But until then, let me see you in my next video. Peace, love, and harmony. Salud.